Hello friends, welcome to the session of the gastrointestinal physiology. In this we will see about the motor functions. Motor functions related, that means related to the deglutition, and then we will be able to see about the motor functions of the stomach. Now, which are the movements of the GI tract? The movements of the GI tract basically we can divide into two types: propulsive movement and the mixing movement. Which are the example of the propulsive movement? What do you mean by propulsive movement? It is going to cause the forward movement of the food. So that will be called as the propulsive movement. Which are the examples of the propulsive movement? Peristalsis, deglutition. So these are the ones which are going to cause forward movement of the food. So these are the propulsive movement. And then they have got the mixing movement. What is the main function of the mixing movement? The mixing movement will make the food well mixed with the intestinal juices, so that the digestion that can be facilitated. And remember, if the mixing is taking place, lot of amount of the food will come in contact with the intestinal mucosa, and the absorption can also be facilitated. So what is the importance of the mixing movement? So that the mixing of the intestinal juices, that is the digestive juices, with the food, that is being taken place, and it will also facilitate the absorption. Which are the examples of the mixing movement? They can be in the form of the segmental contraction, they can be in the form of the hostrations in the large intestine, or the segmental contractions in the small intestine. So these are them. First, what happens in peristalsis? Peristalsis is because of a wave that is generated, a constrictor wave. Suppose, now, this is a part of a intestine, and suddenly if there is a stretching of the part of the intestine. So suppose there is a bolus or the food which is being there, and ultimately what it will cause? It will cause stretching of this muscle fibers. So if there is a stretching of the walls of the intestine, what will happen? A constrictor ring that will be developed just above above the stretch. So this is the constrictor ring that will be developed. And now what will happen? There is a receptive relaxation of the forward part. And now this constrictor ring just will go down. So imagine if this ring goes down, what will happen? It will take the foot or the bolus along with that. This is the simple way the peristalsis can be explained. So what will happen now? Whenever the intestinal mucosa is being stretched up, a constrictor ring will develop in the proximal part, or we can say that the oral part. And what will happen? There will be receptive relaxation at the distal part or the anal part. And then what will happen in that case now? The constriction ring will go down, or it will move towards forward end. So ultimately with the constriction ring, the food will also go forward, right? So normally the peristalsis, this is the law of the gut, states that the peristalsis starts from the oral end and they will always move towards the distal or the anal end. So this is the law of the gut. Except in few conditions, there can be anti-peristalsis also, such as in vomiting. There can be anti-peristalsis which will cause the vomiting. But otherwise, peristalsis always goes from the oral end to the anal end or the distal end. That is this. Remember, this peristalsis is not possible without the myenteric plexus. Remember, the enteric nervous system, which is also called as the third brain, is a complex of neurons which is present all over the GI tract. And the number of neurons present in that, and the interplay among them, that is mainly regulate number of the reflexes we will be seeing, and they will also regulate the movements. Very important is the peristaltic movement. So this peristaltic movement is mainly regulated by the myenteric plexus. It is not possible without the myenteric plexus. But at the same time, peristalsis, even if the intestine, if it is isolated, they can show the peristaltic movement. But if the parasympathetic stimulation is there, the peristaltic waves, it can be accelerated. So the more number of the waves will be generated, not only that, but the constriction will also be more stronger one and the faster one. So that's the peristalsis. Increase in peristalsis will occur because of the sympathetic stimulation. Right? Mixing movement. As I have told you, mixing movement can be of a different type. It can be a segmental contraction. Now what do you mean by segmental contraction? a segment of the, suppose this is the intestine, a segment of the intestine will constrict. Now this part will constrict, this part will constrict, and this will remain flaccid. After some time, what will happen? This part will constrict and this part will relax. So these are called as the segmental contractions. This segmental contraction will also cause mixing of the food with the intestinal juices. Not only that, but the similar type of contractions which we will be seeing later in detail is the hostrations, because of the presence of the circular muscles and the teniacular longitudinal muscles present in the intestine, that is the large intestine. So the hostrations that will be seen, right? So this is the again type of the mixing movement. Even peristalsis also can cause mixing. How does? Now you have to imagine, this is the stomach, this has got the pyloric end. Now if the pyloric end is very narrow, pylorus will act as a good sphincter. It will cause, if it is relaxed, it will cause a movement of the chyme, that will the liquid food that is passed. But if it is constricted or if it is having very narrow opening, and if there is a peristaltic wave in the stomach, what will happen? Once this peristaltic wave will start from the, that is the fundus, it will go to the body, and when it reaches there, because the pyloric end is now very narrow open or it's almost closed now, the chyme will cause, there will be a retropulsations. That means the chyme will go up till this point, that is the pyloric end, and again it will just reverse back. This is called as retropulsations. So the peristaltic waves in the stomach, they can cause the mixing. They are called as the mixing waves now. So the mixing waves are the one which are example which is there in the stomach, which can cause mixing. Now coming to the deglutition or the swallowing reflex. Deglutition is a complex process. Number one thing, why it is a complex process? Because of mainly the pharynx. What is the peculiarity of the pharynx? Pharynx is a passage for both the air as well as the food. So now this pharynx, the passage now, the air passage should be closed for some time and only the food should go. And not only that, but the food should not go into the trachea. It should not go into the larynx and the trachea, but it should go only into the esophagus. So by this way, because of this now, the deglutition becomes much more complex process. Let's imagine if the food is there and it goes into the pharynx. From the pharynx, it has got the 4 ways to go. Either it can come back into the mouth, either it can, from the posterior nails, it can go into the nose, or it can go anteriorly into the larynx and the trachea, or it can go into the esophagus. So what the body has to ensure? Body has to ensure that the 3 openings, they are closed. Anteriorly, it should not come back into the, again in the mouth. Again, from the posterior nails, it should not be regurgitated, nor it should go into the respiratory passage, but only it should go into the esophagus. So it's a complex process by which the passage for the food, ultimately, it is made sure that the food only goes into the esophagus. Deglutition is generally divided into 3 stages. The voluntary or the oral stage, which is voluntary chewing of the food, and then deliberately we can put it back and the tongue will move up and then it will go. So this is under our control. But as soon as that food or the bolus now goes and touches the pharyngeal wall now, because of the reflex now, the reflex that will be there and that the swallowing centers that will be mediating all that reflex, the phase will now become involuntary almost. So now you will not be able to control the swallowing phase. A sequential changes, motor changes that will happen, and ultimately the pharyngeal stage will be there. Again, the next involuntary stage is that once the food is there in the esophagus, the esophageal peristaltic waves that will make the food to move into from the esophagus and it will go into the stomach. So this is called as esophageal stage. So which are the 3 stages of the deglutition? The oral stage, which is voluntary stage. Then we have got is the pharyngeal stage, which is involuntary, and the esophageal stage, which is again involuntary stage. Now we will see one by one in detail. The oral stage. Now what will happen? The chewing, because of the chewing, the saliva will mix with the food, and now the food is converted into what is called as the bolus. Now this bolus has to be squeezed back. So how we squeeze it back? The tongue is pressed upward towards hard palate and the soft palate. So what will happen? The pressure will be developed, and whatever that bolus will be there, that will be pushed backward into the anterior portion of the pharynx. Once that it is pushed backward, now the food will come into contact with the number of the receptors present in the pharynx anterior, mainly in the tonsillar fossa also. So the food will come into the contact of that, and this contact will start now what is called as the pharyngeal stage now. So up till this time, the deglutition was under our control now. But as soon as the food come in contact with the certain receptors, these are called as epithelial swallowing receptor areas, which are present in the anterior ring of the pharynx. So this, once the food comes into contact with it, they will send signal to the swallowing centers, mainly to the 9th nerve and the 10th nerve. They will send signal to the swallowing centers. Swallowing centers present in the medulla and the pons. So the information will go to that, and the swallowing centers now will cause certain motor changes to happen in a sequential manner. This is very, very important. They should have, all these motor changes should occur, and they should occur in a sequential manner, so that ultimately the swallowing process can be taking place. Impulses goes to the glossopharyngeal and the trigeminal nerve mainly. They will go to the nucleus of tractus solitarius. And now because of that, what will happen? The swallowing centers will generate a sequential change. The motor output will be there through which of the following nerves? The motor output will be there to the 5th nerve, 9th nerve, 10th nerve and the 12th cranial nerves. So this can be asked as a multiple choice question, that which are the nerves, cranial nerves which do participate, or which are the cranial nerves which does not participate in the swallowing reflex. So the motor output of the pharyngeal phase is mainly because of what? 5th nerve, 9th nerve, 10th nerve and the 12th nerve. Whereas the input goes mainly to the which nerve? Glossopharyngeal nerve and the trigeminal nerve. So that will be there, right? So what will happen in that sequential changes, motor changes? Soft palate will be pulled upward and backward. So what is the major function of that? The posterior nares should be closed, so that the food does not go into the posterior nares. It should not be regurgitated to the nose. Next, the palatopharyngeal folds of both the sides will be pulled medially and approximate each other to forming a narrow slit. So the narrow slit will be formed, palatopharyngeal folds will be pulled up medially, okay, narrow, and then through that narrow slit now the food can pass. Vocal cords will approximate. This is a very important thing, so that the food should not go into the larynx and the trachea. Tight approximation of the vocal cords. Not only that, but your neck muscles, this will contract and they will pull the larynx upward and the forward. So it will be moved away from the passage of the food. Whatever the slit has been formed by the palatopharyngeal fold, so it will move away from that. Not only that, but the epiglottis, which is also there. The epiglottis will make sure that the food does not goes into the larynx and the vocal cords. That is another additional mechanism. And now what will happen? A wave will be generated in the pharynx, the peristaltic wave. That wave can reach up till the upper esophageal sphincters. So that once that wave is there in the pharynx, that wave will carry the bolus. It will go up till the upper esophageal sphincter. When that wave goes up till the upper esophageal sphincter, it is going to cause the relaxation of the upper esophageal sphincter, and now the bolus will go into the esophagus. So with this now, the pharyngeal phase of the deglutition that will end. Once the bolus is there in the esophagus, now there is a stretching. There is a stretching of the esophagus, and because of that the peristalsis will be generated. Primary peristalsis, which are going to cause, because that will be generated because of the myenteric plexus, and if the bolus is not able to, again because of the gravity also that supports. So mainly the primary peristalsis are insufficient enough to cause the movement of the bolus to the esophagus, and then when it reaches up till the lower end of the esophagus, the lower esophageal sphincter will relax. And because of that, the bolus will go inside the stomach, and there will be receptive relaxation of the stomach. Sometimes if the bolus is hard enough, or if it is difficult to swallow, now the secondary peristalsis, which are through the vasovagal reflex or the parasympathetic reflex, that can be generated, which are much more stronger one, which will make the bolus to move downwards. Swallowing center has got other important role to play also. Swallowing centers will send inhibitory signals to the respiratory center, so that whenever, especially during the pharyngeal phase of the swallowing, whenever there is a food is passing through the pharynx. Now the respiration should be stopped. In whatever the phase it is, the respiration should be stopped. So this is again ensured by the swallowing center, right? Now, when it comes to the motor functions of the stomach, what are the motor functions of the stomach? Stomach will act as mainly the storehouse of the food. Remember, we eat mainly 3 times a day, and if whenever the food, whatever we eat, suddenly goes to the intestine, let's say if the stomach is not there, what will happen? Intestine will get overloaded with the food. There will be no sufficient time for the digestive juices to digest the food. Then the undigested food will be passed on as such. Lot of food will be wasted. Instead of that, what the stomach will do? Stomach will cause mainly it will store the food. And it will slowly release the food according to the need of the intestine. Making sure that the intestine is not overloaded. Slowly it will release it. The digestion process can take place for 3 to 4 hours after the meal. So the slow release is ensured by the stomach. Next most important thing is that most of the food we eat is the solid food. And it should be converted into almost fluid consistency. It should be converted into an isotonic state also. So all these things, they are taken care by the stomach. Lot of stomach juices, they are mixed up so that the consistency becomes very liquid. And now that food will be called as chyme. So that is also another function of the stomach. How much is the storage capacity of the stomach? 0.8 to 1.5 liters. And how does this happen is because of the vasovagal reflex, the relaxation that is taking place of the stomach. Whenever the food enters, stretching of the stomach muscles, fibers, they send impulses to the vagal centers. Again, because of the vagal centers, again there is a decrease in the stimulation of the vagus nerve, and because of that the smooth muscles will relax now, and because of that there is a relaxation of the muscle. So there is a vasovagal reflex. Not only that, but if you recall the property of the smooth muscle, the property is stress relaxation. So whenever the muscle fiber is stretched, after some time it will give out its tension and it will just relax. So because of these two properties, now the stomach will just relax and it can accommodate more and more food without much increase in the pressure, right? Next, what is the important function of the food is that mixing the food. As I told you with the peristaltic or the mixing waves, these are there against the closed this. So mixing of the food and formation of the chyme, and the controlled release of the chyme now to the duodenum according to the need. So this remains that. As I told you about the mixing waves, it's because of the peristaltic waves against the closed pyloric end, which will cause the retropulsations, and that is going to form the chyme. Another motor function of the stomach is the hunger contractions. This you might have experienced some or the other time. What are these hunger contractions? Remember, but this contraction will occur only after 12 to 24 hours of fasting. So hunger contractions we typically call it as. These are nothing but again the peristaltic waves, but this lasts for a little longer time. And if number of such peristaltic waves are generated, they can fuse together. And the tetanic contraction of the stomach can occur for 2 to 3 minutes. And again there is a relaxation. So these are nothing but the hunger contractions. This can become maximum if there is a 3 to 4 days of starvation, hunger contraction. And then afterwards they will fade away, right? So these are called as the hunger contraction. Next is the emptying of the stomach. Now this is a very important factor. As I told you, the body has to ensure that the intestine is not overloaded. So there are some factors which facilitates the emptying of the stomach. There are some certain factors which will inhibit the emptying of the stomach. Pylorus is the one which will make sure that how much amount of the chyme goes to the duodenum. So pylorus is the one which is controlling one through the pyloric sphincter, right? So how does mainly the emptying is taking place? If the stomach wants to empty the content, the peristaltic wave that will be generated, it will become stronger, it will go to the pyloric end, and now even at the pyloric end now there will be a wave that will be transmitted. It can go even into the upper part of the duodenum. This peristaltic wave, or this can be called as the pyloric pump, that will be generated, right? And this will cause emptying of the chyme into the duodenum. But remember, again, it is a more of a controlled fashion. That is mainly the pyloric sphincter will open only for the fluid-like consistency of the chyme. If the chyme is more solid, if the chyme is much more acidic, then it will not be, the opening will not be much for that amount of the chyme. What are the factors which promote the stomach emptying? So there are certain factors which will promote the stomach emptying, there are certain factors which will inhibit it. But remember, those factors which are inhibiting it are much more stronger than those factors which promote it. Just to ensure that the duodenum is not overloaded and the good amount of the digestion and the absorption that can be facilitated. First we will see what are the factors which promote the stomach emptying. Naturally, if the stomach is overloaded, excess distension of the stomach, excess of the food volume, more stretch of the stomach wall, then it will elicit the local mesenteric reflexes, and again it is going to cause the more emptying of the stomach. Gastric, which is the hormone released by the stomach, so that will again going to facilitate the stomach emptying. But as I told you, the facilitatory factors are much weaker than compared to that of the inhibitory factors. Now what are the inhibitory factors? Naturally, the inhibition will be there from the duodenum and the upper part of the small intestine. If it is getting overloaded, it will send the reflexes, inhibition, it will cause the inhibition of the stomach emptying. So these inhibitory factors, they are mainly from the duodenum and the upper intestine, and they are mediated by the nervous mechanism as well as the humoral mechanism. So these are the ones they are mediated. What are the stimulus for the inhibitory factors when they are getting more stronger one? Increased load over the duodenum, so they will cause more inhibition of the stomach emptying. If it is the duodenum is exposed to more and more acidic chyme, so it will going to cause inhibit the stomach emptying. If the duodenum is exposed to excess hypertonic or hypotonic chyme, in that case what will happen? The fluid osmolality can suddenly change because of the absorption of this fluid. So ultimately the chyme has to be nearly isotonic. So if at all, if there is hyper or hypotonic chyme, then it is going to cause more inhibition of the stomach emptying. If the duodenum or the upper intestine, it is loaded with the breakdown product of the food, that is proteins and fat, and if which takes longer time for digestion now, then again there will be inhibition sent to the stomach and the stomach emptying will be delayed one. How does the inhibition occurs actually? It is by the nervous mechanism, and it is because of some hormones which are acting. Which are the nervous mechanism? To enteric nervous system, right? So there will be a enterogastric reflex, and that is going to cause the inhibition of the stomach emptying. To prevertebral sympathetic ganglia. Remember, the sympathetic system can cause the decrease in the contraction of the it can decrease the peristalsis, it can decrease the contraction of it can cause relaxation of the smooth muscles of the stomach. So to prevertebral sympathetic ganglia also the reflexes that can be sent, and it is going to cause the inhibition. Vagovagal reflex again, the less vagal stimulation of the stomach. So that is also going to decrease certain hormones which are released by the upper GI tract. Cholecystokinin, secretin, VIP or GIP again. So these are the ones which are going to cause the gastric inhibitory peptide. So that is also going to cause the inhibition of the stomach emptying, right? So as we have seen that the emptying of the stomach is much more regulated fashion, and there are certain facilitatory factors and there are certain inhibitory factors, and you have to remember that the inhibitory factors are much more stronger, just to ensure that the stomach emptying is a much more controlled way and the more absorption and the digestion of the food that can be facilitated, right? So with this we come to end of this lecture. Thank you.